continue week 2 of our journey series. I just want to say, if you missed last week, you need to hit that up on the podcast because Pastor Darius did an incredible job kicking us off into the journey series. You can find that at faithtricities.org/messages. So it's easy to find. And I don't know about you, it was fun this week. If you want to add a little humor to taking in a message that you missed, there's a setting on YouTube where you can just go increase the speed to 2 times, and it's really fun. So if you want to take that in, that's a great way to do it. Don't miss a Sunday. So, but we're glad you're here. We're going to continue in this journey series. But here's the thing I want to encourage you. This isn't just the journey of like from the time you were born to the time you die, or the journey through the year. This is really asking a bigger question of what does the Bible have to say? How does it unpack for us what it means to find and follow Jesus? As a group of people, of believers in Pasco, that's why we exist, to find and follow Jesus, and then to help others find and follow Jesus. And so as we journey through Scripture, we're asking that big question. What are the steps? What are the practical ways that we can help others find and follow Jesus as we continue on that journey for ourselves? If you're not already, I would love to encourage you to download the Read Scripture app on your smartphone or on your tablet, however you want to do it. If you don't have either of those, or you would prefer the paper method, we have them out at the information center. You can grab that and track along with us. But it's just an opportunity to journey together. We're all reading the same stuff and processing it together. And then each week, the message will be out of last week's readings. And so it's a good way for you to kind of be on the same page and peek ahead. But it's a great opportunity. You can even set reminders right in the app at the time of day you want to read, and encourage you in that. Engaging Scriptures is one of those transformational environments that'll change your life. And so we encourage you in it. But last week, we looked at Proverbs chapter 3, and the encouragement was this, is that we need to put our faith and our trust in the wisdom of God. This week, we're going to continue through the rest of Proverbs and ask this big question is, what does wisdom look like in our everyday lives? What does wisdom look like Monday to Friday, right? What is wisdom? How do we live with wisdom? And here's the reality is the reason we need to ask that question is because dumb comes natural. I don't know if you know that or not, but we don't need help making dumb decisions. Like it just happens, right? It just comes out of your life, whether you like it or not. I thought of a lot of examples I could use for my own life, but it's more fun to pick on other people. So I was thinking back to, I'm not going to tell you which family member it was, but we were once driving from Medical Lake to Spokane. It's about a half hour. That's where I grew up. And we were going to play softball. So we were headed in, and I was in one car. One of my family members was driving solo in a car behind us. But he realized, like, if you're going to play softball, one of the key things you got to have is your ball cap, right? You got to have your baseball cap. And so he is driving down the highway 55 miles an hour and starts glancing around the car looking for his ball cap. When he spotted it, behind the passenger seat. So he did one of these, right? Like you've done it. Don't lie. We've all done it, right? He's driving and he does one of these. Well, the problem is when you're driving, you naturally go wherever you're looking. And so 55 miles an hour, I remember looking behind me, watching his car disappear behind a molehill, and then come over the other side, all 4 tires off the ground. I'm laughing because it worked out well. Like, this could have been a really bad story, but it's not, because he landed his 1978 Subaru 4-door, all 4 wheels off the ground, all 4 wheels on the ground, popped back up on the highway, white knuckle the rest of the way to Spokane, right? Like, dumb comes natural, right? And so we got to ask the question, and a nicer way to say it would be to say this: wisdom requires intentionality. We don't make wise decisions on accident. We don't make wise decisions just off the cuff. It's something that requires you to be intentional in your life. So a little bit of context. As we walk through the book of Proverbs, there's a couple things you need to know. The first one is this. There's a couple characters that we're introduced to. The first one is Lady Wisdom. Lady Wisdom is this stately and poised and elegant lady who constantly has this conversation with the hearer, because Proverbs would have originally been heard, not read, but constantly has a conversation with the hearer, or for us, the reader, and invites you, the reader, to come and to engage with her in wisdom, right? To come and experience wisdom. And then there's also Lady Folly, who is a seductive and elusive and kind of flighty lady who is constantly inviting the reader to come engage in her foolishness. And so what we're seeing here is obviously these ladies don't really exist. It's not a nod to some character in history. It's a poetic style of personifying a concept. And so Lady Wisdom represents wisdom. Lady Folly represents foolishness. Not a real person, just a personification. Another important concept for us to grab a hold of here is Proverbs chapter 8 tells us that wisdom was actually something that God created, but he created it before he created everything else. Wisdom was God's first creation. So before he gave the earth any form, or before he gave our universe any boundaries or any form, he created wisdom. Another way to say it would be that wisdom is the foundation on which all the rest of creation is built. And this wisdom isn't just making a smart decision. It's not just talking to a friend and making what we would brand a wise decision. It's a wisdom that comes from God. It comes from God. It's something that started with God. It remains in God. And this wisdom always leads us back to God. And so this wisdom, it sets it apart, right? It's a different brand of wisdom. This wisdom is a God-oriented wisdom. So that leads us to this question. Is what role does Proverbs play in our journey of finding and following Jesus? How is it more than just some good advice, right? Because we've all heard it. We've all heard these sayings from Proverbs before, like pride comes before a fall, right? We've all heard it before. So how does it go from this quippy little saying to something that would contribute to our journey of finding and following Jesus? It's helpful for me to think about it like this. So much of, there's these phrases in Scripture, and so often as a preacher, it's fun to find these phrases that kind of boil down the Christian life to like one little thing that you can remember. So in the Old Testament, right, God gave us the 10 commandments, right? The whole Old Testament is summed up in these 10 instructions. Then the New Testament comes and God's like, wow, apparently 10 is too many. Like they can't keep up with 10. I'll give them 2, right? Just love God, love people. If you can just remember that, right? It kind of boils it down. All of the Christian life is summed up in these 2 statements. But here's the problem. There's a lot of white space within that, right? There's a lot of like, okay, but yeah, how does that work? Like in our house, we use this phrase: do unto others as you would have them do to you, right? Treat your brother like you want your brother to treat you. And I don't know about you, but my 8-year-old and my 10-year-old, they do a lot better with don't hit back, right? They do a lot better with say please and thank you. They do a lot better with take turns and share your toys and use nice words, right? They need something that helps them understand this is how you live that out. All of that falls under do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But it helps them understand this is how you live it out. And that's what Proverbs does for us. It takes this big umbrella of following God, and it says this is what it looks like in your everyday life. This is the application. This is how it actually works. And so that's the context that we lean into when it comes to Proverbs. This is how you live out a Jesus-oriented life of loving God and loving people. And that means this, that these Proverbs aren't suggestions. They're not little ways to make your life better. These Proverbs aren't suggestions. They're actually directions for how we are supposed to live. They're imperatives to us rather than just a bunch of good ideas. So it's with that context that we dive into Proverbs chapter 8, which is what we're going to look at today. If you have a Bible, you can open up there. It'll also be on the screen behind me. But Proverbs chapter 8, Lady Wisdom, this personification of wisdom, makes some really bold claims. Like she says some things that you're like, okay, prove it. Like how does this work out? And we're going to look at those today and how they contribute to our lives. So Proverbs chapter 8, verse 32, and I'm going to read through verse 36, and then we'll come back and kind of chew on it a little bit. Okay, verse 32 says this. So now listen to me, my children. Those who live by my ways will find true happiness. Pay attention to my guidance and dare to be wise. Don't disregard my teachings. The one who listens to me, who carefully seeks me in everyday things and delays action until my way is apparent, that one will find true happiness. For when he recognizes and follows me, he finds a peaceful and a satisfying life and receives favor from the eternal. But heed my warning, the one who goes against me will only hurt himself. For all who despise me are playing with fire and courting death. So as we look back at this, there's three things I want to pull out. Three things to answer this question. How do I live with wisdom? Okay, so three things. Here we go. Verse 34 starts out with this. The one who listens to me, who carefully seeks me in everyday things. The first thing we got to realize is this, is your decisions matter. The things you decide to do, the choices you make matter. Wisdom is begging you to notice, right? This lady is begging you to notice your decisions matter. When I met my wife, Erica, we met like, we were both hanging out with the same group of people, right? Really casual. It wasn't like a one-on-one, like, hey, it's just, we ended up in the same circle. And so I knew if I was gonna attract her attention, that I was gonna have to deploy some of my like super smooth moves, right? So like, I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I get this beautiful girl's attention? So we went out to Red Robin with a whole group of friends, and she was sitting across the table from me. So we talked and all this stuff, and here was my line at the end of the night to let her know, like, hey, I'm serious about this thing. Like, I wanna get to know you. I go, hey, how do you spell your last name? I'll look you up on MySpace, right? So like, this was my initial like, hey, the worst part of it is her last name was Thompson. Like, it's not hard to spell. I'm just like, I'm letting you know that I'm in it to win it here, right? Like, I'm gonna look you up on MySpace. But then I had to make a decision, right? I go home, the first thing I did was log on my computer and go on MySpace, and find this Erica Thompson and add her. But I had to decide, right? Like, when's the right time to message her, right? Is it a 24-hour rule? Do I have 3 hours? Is it, I don't want to look desperate, but I am, so how do I get across, right? So I'm trying to figure out how to do this, but here's the thing that I realized looking back is the decision I made there mattered, right? Like, that little call of like, I'm coming after this girl. Like, I want to get to know her. That mattered because it changed the rest of my life. And that's the funny thing is there's a million decisions you'll make in your life that will change the trajectory of your life. Your decisions matter. It's not just, I think we'll try this today. No, you will make decisions in your everyday that will redirect the course of your life. And they will change the game for you. Ask any professional and they'll tell you this. Little daily decisions about your money, little daily decisions about your health, little daily decisions about your education or keeping your mind sharp, little daily decisions about your fitness, about your marriage, about your parenting, they will change everything. Here's the thing, wisdom is begging you to notice your decisions actually matter. Like what you decide day in and day out actually matters to the big picture of your life. So here's the question is how do we build a framework? How do I make wise decisions? Here's the first thing I'd encourage you. Just ask the question, is this wise? Right? Like how many times would that have saved us in our lives if we would have just asked the question, is this wise? Is this wise often turns out a different answer than should I do this? Right? Because should I do this is objective. It's like, sure, why not? Right? Doesn't matter. Like it's just this, it's just that. But is this wise causes us to stop and ask, like what's the outcome here? What road is this gonna lead me? Turns out me messaging Eric on MySpace, good decision. It was wise decision. Your decisions matter. And that's why Lady Wisdom says this, the one who listens to me, who carefully seeks me in everyday things. But then she goes on, and delays action until my way is apparent. That one will find true happiness. Here's the second key to living with wisdom is this. Wisdom takes time. Wisdom takes time. I don't know very many people that make wise decisions when they're deciding in a split second, right? It's just not natural. It's not natural to make a wise decision when you got to make it right now. But wisdom takes time. I like this idea of waiting to see until my way becomes clear. Wisdom takes time. If you could jump back to driver's ed, right? Driver's ed is where we learn a lot of things that don't come natural to us, right? And thank God for driver's ed because I think it helps us, right? I thank God for driver's ed because I was in a car with some of those students and they needed driver's ed. My first drive was, I was a good driver, okay? So I had a perfect drive. Parked at the gas station, switched seats with this gal who's in the back seat. She gets up there, gets in the driver's seat. Like the instructor's still putting on her seatbelt. She throws that thing in reverse and guns it. Did I mention we're at a gas station? Like, dear God, I'm gonna die. Like, this is how Micah goes, right? Ball of flames at a gas station, right? Driver's ed teacher hits the, oh my goodness, brake, and the car's all contorted because we were going 100 miles an hour in reverse when he hit the brakes, right? I'm thankful for driver's ed, but here's one of the key things you learn in driver's ed, right? Look further down the road. Because when you're learning to drive, all of us have the same problem. We're so consumed with what's right in front of us that we can't see what's further down the road. But if you're gonna have an appropriate reaction when you're driving, you have to look further down the road. And wisdom asks us to do the same thing in our lives. Look further down the road. The further you wanna go in life, the further ahead you need to look when you're making that decision. Why? Because wisdom takes time. And if we're always consumed with how this impacts me today or what this is gonna immediately produce in our life, we are bound to making foolish decisions because wisdom asks us to look further down the road. I remember listening to a guy teach on parenting once, and he changed my world when he said this. When I'm thinking about parenting, he goes this, he says, I'm not raising kids. I'm raising future adults that I wanna have a healthy relationship with. And it changed the paradigm for me. It went from change their diaper, get food in their stomach, and get them to preschool on time. That was my goal for parenting. And all of a sudden I started to realize, no, we're generating a relationship right here that I want to have for the rest of my life. Here's the thing. Wisdom begs you, look further down the road when you're making that decision. What does that look like for you today? To rather than making a decision based on what it's going to turn out right now, to look further down the road. We've all heard people say, if I knew then what I know now, I would have made a different decision. I think wisdom asks us to consider this. What does it look like to choose now based on where you want to be then? What does it look to make decisions now that change where you're at in 20 years? What does it look like to make decisions now that will shift that relationship or that situation or that circumstance in your life 20 years from now? Your decisions matter, and wisdom takes time. So we turn to Lady Wisdom's claim about what we get when we find wisdom. In verse 35, it says this, for when he recognizes and follows me, again, this is the person who's finding wisdom. When they recognize and follow me, they find a peaceful and a satisfying life and receive favor from the eternal. But heed my warning, the one who goes against me will only hurt himself. For all who despise me are playing with fire and courting death. The last key to wisdom is to understand this. The rewards of wisdom, the rewards of God's wisdom satisfy from the inside out. And here's what that changes for us is so often when we're thinking about making a wise decision, we're looking for how it's gonna end. We want a scientific approach. If I do this, I get this, right? If I do this with my money, I get this from my money. If I do this, then I'm gonna be able to build this kind of life for myself. If I do this, then it will make my life easier in this way. But the difference between that and God's wisdom is God's going, hey, I'm not so much looking at your circumstances as I'm looking at your heart. God's wisdom doesn't satisfy us by giving us all that we want on the outside. It satisfies us from giving us what we need in our soul. So here's the difference, is all of a sudden it doesn't necessarily always make sense on paper, right? It doesn't make sense to be kind to other people. It doesn't make sense to hold your tongue when you could defend yourself. It doesn't make sense, but yet God's wisdom says, wait, time out. Follow me and I'll satisfy you. I'll give you a peaceful and fulfilling life starting right here and then overflowing into your situation. The rewards and consequences of wisdom happen in your heart and then overflow into your life. I think it's important for us to recognize that every want that we have on the outside actually connects to a need that we have in our souls. And as humans, we all share this brokenness, is that we have a tendency to try to meet soul level needs with external things. We think, if I had that vacation home, then I would have rest. If I just drove this kind of car, then I would have confidence. I would have meaning in life. If I had this kind of house, then my family would all want to be there. If I had these possessions, or if I could dress like this, if I could look like this, then they would feel like this about me at work, and I would be a different person. But the problem is, all of us have the same problem, that we get those things and find out we're still the same person. The wisdom of God says, no, let's talk about the heart, and then this stuff will take care of itself. And that's the difference between man's wisdom and God's wisdom for you. I mentioned earlier, I have a 10-year-old son. So we're deep into this phase of life of what I call talking it out. Like when they're little, you just discipline them and move on, hope they do better next time, right? You just correct them and go back. But now I'm like trying to get him to change his thinking. So we have these heart-to-hearts where he'll make a decision that's not wise, and we'll sit down and talk about it. And I'm trying to just change his mind. I'm trying to help him see this is why this thinking is important. Honestly, sometimes I feel like part of his punishment is having to listen to me like awkwardly stumble my way through these conversations. So you see, it's like this. He's like, no, Dad, I don't get it, right? And part of me is thinking he's just feeling like, Dad, could you just spank me and we can move on, right? Like I'd rather have the other, you know? But we wrestle through this, and I'm trying to shift his thinking. I'm trying to help him see, if you could just see this, if you could just see the life that I'm trying to help you live. If you could just see, if you will do this, the outcome is so good. If you will just understand that this is the way it works, this is life, and if you'll engage this, you'll have an awesome life. People will like you, you'll be successful, it's all good. Come on, think like me, right? The funny thing is, I think that's what Proverbs is saying us today. If you'll just understand the life that God's trying to give you, if you'll just understand, engaging God's wisdom may not make sense right now, but the life he's trying to give you is so full, is so good, is so satisfying for your soul. And so often we look at wisdom and we push at it because it doesn't make sense. Or, God, are you sure this is how it's, I don't know if I can trust you like that. And he's saying, if you just knew the life I'm trying to give you, you wouldn't resist me. So what does it look like for you to begin to make decisions with God's wisdom? How do we fill in all this white space below finding and following Jesus? How do we fill in all the gaps of how we love God and how we love people? What does it look like in your everyday? Here's what I encourage you. We talked about it at the beginning. This is going to require intentionality. None of us are going to make wise decisions just, we heard a talk from Proverbs, now I'm wise. No, it's about what you do with it. So what does it look like for you? Maybe for you, it's realizing that the decisions you make actually matter. Like what you decide to do today and tomorrow and the day after that have implications in your life. And maybe for you, it's that you need to pump the brakes. Maybe you're like that girl in Driver's Ed who's just like, gas pedal, here we go. And wisdom would pump the brakes and say, hey, slow down. What does it look like to not think about next year, but to think about 10 years from now? What would it change in your parenting if you didn't think about what you wanted your kids to do today, but who you wanted them to be when they're adults? What would it change in your life, in your finances, in your health, in your relationship with God if you realized that what the little things that you would do today could change the trajectory of your life? Maybe for you, it's just walking away with the confidence that God's wisdom will satisfy you from the heart level out. That what you need doesn't come from what you can gain or how people think about you, but who your God says you are, and living with a wisdom that would satisfy your soul. What does it look like for you today? I'd encourage you to wrestle with this. I know this isn't like I know exactly what to do now, but I do think there's a decision that has to be made. What are you gonna do about wisdom? How are you gonna live it out in your life? Let's pray. Father, thank you for who you are. God, I'm grateful that you give us your wisdom, that it's not just man's good ideas, that it's not just trying to improve the way we think about life or the way we apply life. But God, you invite us to think about your wisdom, the wisdom on which the foundations of the world rest. God, I pray today for those who are in here who feel like they've made so many foolish decisions that it's too late. I pray, God, that you'd help them to see that wisdom doesn't ask a question about yesterday, but it will ask questions about tomorrow. God, that we would choose wisdom from this point forward. God, I pray for those that feel like they're in such a rush, that at work, that in life, that in their marriage and their parenting, they don't have time to make the wise decision. God, I pray that you would give them the insight to look further down the road and to think differently about the decisions they would choose today. And God, that every one of us would walk away with a confidence that the satisfying life, the fulfilled life, the life of a wholehearted person starts when we engage you, when we come to you, and then when we live out your wisdom. God, we thank you that you gave wisdom to us as a gift. Pray that we would live it out with everything that we do, that our decisions, God, would embrace this reality that they matter to you, that they matter to eternity. We pray this in Jesus' name.